Hey, good morning. Welcome to the third episode of the Modern Leadership Podcast. I'm Tim Nolan. Today, this is really exciting. You're definitely going to want to pay attention to this. I just found a new article from the Harvard Business Review on psychological safety that I'm going to talk about. This is really good stuff, and I'm also going to focus on how this can be effectively implemented with your teams. There's some misconceptions in the article which are really good. From Amy Edmondson and Michaela Carasy. Uh, but again, from the Harvard Business Review, really, really good article. Just came out June of 2025. So, really good stuff. Now, in this article, I make some summary points, and I'm going to put a link for it in the notes too, so you can look at the article yourself. You're definitely going to want to take a look at this. And there's some really key distinctions that come. So, a couple of things to look at is when we look at a basic definition. Again, people feel safe to speak up. And other points to look at is when you look at the purpose of psychological safety. Why do we want a psychologically safe environment? And that's to increase learning and performance. And also, the article points out that psychological safety is a shared sense of permission for candor, where sharing truth is expected. That's a really interesting distinction because, with groups I work with, I'm always talking about psychological safety, and I think people conceptually get it. They're like, okay, yeah, I need to create an environment to where people should be talking about things. But what happens is when I get involved sometimes with groups and organizations, and we start doing some focus groups, or if we start doing some surveys, anonymous surveys, people report very different findings themselves, the employees. They're oftentimes like, yeah, I don't feel it's psychologically safe, even though the manager may feel they're facilitating that. And that's kind of related to blind spots in some ways, which I think next episode I'm going to focus on blind spots because that's a really good topic to look at. But when we look at psychological safety, is what are we doing to really create this kind of environment? So I want to go over a couple things here that the article stresses about, and it looks at 6 common misconceptions of psychological safety. And some of these things will definitely resonate with you. So the first one is psychological safety means being nice. And so I like the example that the article gave where this one consultant was working with a group, and the group's like, yeah, we don't have any disagreements in our group. And the consultant was kind of like, yeah, that's a red flag. Like, no. And when you think about it, gr- groups do well, teams do best when there's healthy debate. And healthy debate is disagreement and in some cases conflict. And so that's healthy. That helps move a team forward if it's managed well. So if people are not discussing things, if they're not pushing back, if they're not offering different perspectives, that is a red flag. And so when you're leading people, if you're leading teams and people are just kind of coming to meetings and just doing what you tell them to do, it may be easy for you, but that's not the most conducive environment to get high levels of performance. You want to create an expectation. Go back to this definition that was shared where sharing truth is expected. And so, what are you doing to create an environment to where you want people to say, hey, you know what? I get where you want to go with this, but I have some concerns about that. Okay, let's hear it. I want to hear your concerns. So again, psychological safety is not being nice. The second one is psychological safety means getting your way. And so one of the things to look at is that we want people to speak. We want people to share concerns. But just because they do, it doesn't mean it's going to be implemented. And I think that's a misconception that some people have. In fact, I was working with a group this week, in fact, where we are discussing something a little bit different than psychological safety. It's a nonprofit agency, and they focus on what's called trauma informed, being a trauma informed organization. And so there's some different precepts that come with that. Very similar to psychological safety in some regards. And so the manager was relaying that, well, they were having to reinforce expectations because uh, in a nonprofit world, you have to meet contract compliance, and that's how you keep your contract and be in good standing with the funder. And so you have to reinforce those expectations with employees. And so this one employee was pushing back, saying, this is not a trauma informed environment if you're making me do X, Y, and Z. When in fact, well, those are the expectations. That's how we get paid. You got to go do this. It hasn't changed. And so, but this is related to psychological safety because sometimes if people are not seeing it clearly, they're thinking, hey, I get to share what I think and it's going to happen. And that's not the case. Psychological safety just opens a door so that you can walk through it and say, hey, I don't agree with what we're doing here, or I have concerns about this. And the manager or whatever leader in the organization is going to be receptive to that and listen to you and say, okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Okay, either A, we're able to do something with it, or B, we can't do something, or we can't do something right now. And the other person needs to be like, okay, well, thank you for listening and appreciate that. So, again, psychological safety doesn't mean getting your way. The third one is psychological safety equals job security. And the article further breaks it down looking at freedom from layoffs. So, no, obviously, that's not the case. That, again, that there's you want to be able to share your challenges and concerns, but if an organization is going through a reorg or they're eliminating positions, even if it is a psychologically safe environment, if a business decision is made, people are going to lose their jobs, unfortunately, in that case. So that does not directly relate, but that can be a misconception. That's a really good one. And here's a really good one too, is psychological safety requires a trade-off with performance. This is something you're going to want to look at a little bit more when you go through the article. Psychological safety requires a trade-off with performance. And so, once again, if psychological safety is present on your team at a high level, people are talking about things. You're having team meetings, people are active, they're engaged. We're going to go over some of those indicators in a few minutes. And so, in sharing those concerns, but there's expectations. So, there are certain things that people have to do. And it doesn't mean that I don't have to perform at a certain level, or I don't need to go above and beyond, or whatever it may be. And no, that's not the case. That, again, I think it's really clarifying that it's really about you freely sharing your concerns, and we're going to do the best we can to be able to accommodate that. But again, it's not a trade-off with performance. And so just because people are being honest, it doesn't mean you're going to implement what they say. And it doesn't mean that the expectations are going to change. But it's just psychological safety is a mechanism to get high levels of performance. Look at it that way. And so I have some really cool things from the article I'm going to share with you as well. So the fifth misconception is that psychological safety is a policy. And the article discusses how one state was trying to pass a law and you can't mandate psychological safety. Psychological safety is more of a best practice that people are trying to get to. They're it's like self-actualization. Like you may never get there, but you're always actively working towards it. So it can't be a company policy. Is you want to talk about it, not in large amounts, but again, focus on the process. And again, where people can freely share their concerns. And the last misconception is that psychological safety requires a top-down approach, meaning like from leaders, organizational leaders and down. And the article stresses that, well, it's really everyone should be practicing psychological safety at all levels. And that's a really good point because we want to educate people on the ability to provide each other feedback. So, for example, I'm working with this group yesterday and we are talking about change. And it was a group member brought up a really good point. They said, because I asked them, what's your vision for if someone's responding well to change? What does that look like to you? And so one person said, Well, I would like to see them police each other, like hold each other accountable so that, following up on things, following through, doing things a certain way. And so that can occur, or more likely to occur, in a psychologically safe environment. And so what I'm what I'm about to share with you next breaks down some really cool components of it. And one of the things this article mentions is that you really want to try to talk about the term psychological safety minimally. You don't need to go about talking to people and saying, hey, psychological safety. What you really should be focusing on is the process. And so it talks about focus on the goal, the context, and why everyone's input matters. That is really good. And I'll give you a really good example, again, from the group yesterday, because I was talking about this article. And one person said, you know what, Tim, it's funny you mention that because we had a situation recently where we had this employee who had a lot of background knowledge on a particular issue. And they didn't want to talk. They didn't want to talk in a group setting. And so, but what they did, they went to them um, on the side and said, I really want you to talk about this. You have great expertise and your input really matters on this issue. And that next meeting, they were quite vocal. And it's almost like they are given permission, if you think about it, in this situation. It sounds like they are given permission, like you can speak because your input, your perspective matters. So I think that that's a really great point is what are we doing to create environments to where, again, to me, it goes back to think about your team meetings. And I was working with an executive once who would complain frequently that whenever he would come in for and facilitate a team meeting, no one's talking. They're taking notes and they go ahead and do whatever he said. And he's like, I want people to talk about things and I want them to share their concerns and I want to have some debate. And so just saying it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And so, but I think focusing on the message that what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? As well as making sure that everyone's input matters. So that could be following up with people individually. So if you have some quiet people in your groups, and again, be able to say, hey, Tim, one of the things I noticed is that you don't talk a lot in our team meetings. I was curious why. Ask some questions and see what they have to say. But you also want to, come from a positive standpoint. Like, when you do speak, you have some really good things to share. And so I really enjoy the perspective that you offer, and I'd like to see more of that. And so that's a great way to challenge and nudge employees too, without making them feel threatened or you're coming down on them. Where you come from a standpoint that it would be nice to see more of this. I know you have it, and I'd like to see more of that for you. And that's definitely something we'll talk about more in the future, looking at some performance goals and really focusing on your one-on-one meetings. And so another point when we look at psychological safety and action says focus on work goals and why they matter. So this is when we're starting to connect for people, connect the work that and the task that they're doing. That here's why that matters. So, and I think that's a really good point. And when you focus on things like that, you're helping to create a meaningful professional experience for people. And that's what psychological safety really does as a byproduct. It helps to create a meaningful professional experience for individuals. And as a leader, as a manager, you want that, and because you can't solve everything yourself, and you want people to be heavily invested in the outcome, not just doing it because it's a job. So I'll give you a good example. I was at the post office today, mailing out some books to folks, and some of the individuals behind the counter, something was happening where this new process got updated, and several people were really excited, and this other individual was kind of like no emotion. And one customer behind me even said, like, hey, you don't seem too excited about that. And she's like, yeah, it's just a job. I'm just doing it, get through the day. And that makes me think, like, what are we doing to create an environment for someone like that who is probably below average in engagement, And they're doing their job, they're competent, but what can we do to maybe elevate it just a little bit? And are we asking them, what are your thoughts about this? What are opportunities for improvement? So, and the last thing this article focuses on is improving the quality of team conversations. Much very similar to what I've been talking about. But we're ensuring everyone is on the same page with goals. People are asking questions, and you're a good listener when people are talking. So you're listening, you're taking notes, you're asking follow-up questions. So that shows the group that you're engaged as well. So that's a really key point to look at. And lastly, this article looks at indicators that if you have psychological safety, if that's healthy on your team, here's some things that you should be seeing. So it says people are contributing and listening. So everyone on your team is contributing at a level that works for them. So, people are going to contribute differently. People are advocating for their ideas and positions, as well as inquiry are present. So they're advocating for their ideas along with group members are asking questions to learn more about things, whether asking you or asking teammates. So, but as a leader, you want to look at, am I asking the right questions? Am I asking enough questions? Am I talking too much? So psychological safety can really help prompt you to ask better questions of people as well. And lastly, it looks at for indicators, there's mutual learning and progress are happening. So whether it's being data driven, but psychological safety really encompasses so many things. And once again, just looking at psychological safety from the prism of we want people to be candid with you. We want people to freely share things. And I'll give you a couple things to consider too, is that, sometimes people don't want to talk. And there's a common fear amongst employees that they'll be retaliated against if they mention something. And so one of the best things to do is talk about something small, see what their feedback is. And if they're reluctant to speak, talk about this with your team. Like, hey, team, I'm not sure if sometimes people are on the fence. They're on the fence with giving feedback or any kind of criticism because they're fearful something's going to come back, some blowback, some pushback. So what you can do in that situation, talk about that and talk about yourself. Like, you know what? I felt like that too at different places, but it's my goal. I want you to want to talk. And what you can do is say, hey, why don't you give me a shot? Just give me something. Give me something small. See how I react. And if you don't like how I react, then you don't have to tell me anything in the future. I'm not going to bother you about it. But give me an opportunity. Give me a chance. And so that's one way to look at it. Another thing to consider is doing a 3-question anonymous survey. I'm a big fan of these. And a 3-question anonymous survey. And so in a situation like this, you may want to look at, okay, you can do like SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, something anonymous. And tell them ahead of time, hey, team, I'm going to give you a survey. We're going to focus on psychological safety. And you want to provide a definition. Provide a definition, whether it's a website, so they get some context, because everyone has their own view of it. And ask them, like, how would you rate how present psychological safety is? Like, how strong do you feel it is on our team on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being, really present, really strong. 1, very weak. And then the second question is, give me some examples of how you feel psychological safety is in place on the team. What are some things that you've seen? And then question 3 is suggestions for to make our team more psychologically safe. Like, what can I do? What can we do to make the environment more psychologically safe? So you have those 3 questions. Give it to the team and just tell them, hey, team, my goal is to get 100% completion. It's your team. Now, if you have a team of like 1 or 2 people, that can be very challenging because you're like, well, I'm probably going to be able to guess who it is. But nevertheless, I think that you want to try to do that. But if you have a team of 5 or more, then it's harder to really try to pinpoint that. But you want 100% completion. And then once you get that, Then you bring the team back together, talk about themes. Like, hey team, thank you for doing the survey. Talk about general themes. So, like for example, if someone says it's a 1 and this place sucks, you don't need to share that. You can just say, all right, got some good feedback. Some people said they feel it's really safe, they can ask questions. And a couple other people said, sometimes they don't feel like their input's really warranted or supported. And say, all right. And then the real opportunity becomes you in your next one-on-one meeting. That's when you ask people individually. So you're like, hey Tim, recently you did a survey, hopefully you completed it. Is there anything that you would like to add from that? And just sit back, see what they have to say. And there's an increased likelihood that they will be able to talk about something. They will want to talk about something. Because the alternative is talking about it in a group, and you're going to get crickets. So the survey, the 3-question targeted survey, is a great way to open the door. And then you can talk about it as a team, see what comes up, follow up individually. And whenever you do this, a couple things to look at. Couple things is number 1, you need to have good professional maturity, meaning you're not, if someone gives you something negative, you're not looking to hunt people down like who's the one that said this. As a leader, you want to look at why did they say this? What is going on that makes them feel in this way? So that should be your focus. Look, negative feedback stinks. It stings. It really does. But once you get through that, work through your own process and just really focus on, okay, why did that person say that? Do they have an axe to grind? Is this that one person who's been written up or having performance issues? Or does someone genuinely feel that no one's asking me and no one really seems to care about what I'm saying? And you should be interested in that and looking at how can you improve that. So doing those targeted surveys from time to time can be really good. Now, you don't want to do them all the time or too often because people can get survey fatigue. But the goal is it opens a door for great dialogue. And so from there, you want to see how people are responding, how many people are responding. That's a good indicator as well. If you have low response rates, then they don't feel psychological safety. That tells you a lot. So let's say you do it and you get low response rates. You're like, okay, 2 out of 10 people did it. I'm not really getting a lot of response here. Why is that? And then that's something you can talk about with the group too, is like, I'd like to do this in a couple months again. And I'd like to see a higher response rate and encourage them to be honest and saying, look, if you don't feel like you have a voice or anyone's asking your opinion, then put it in the survey. I have no idea who you are. I want to do a great job. I want to do a great job. So these are things to look at. And also a great byproduct of doing something like this is it creates more of a psychologically safe environment, number 1. But number 2 is if you have psychological safety present on your team, you're going to get better critical thinking from your employees as well. And they're going to take more initiative because if you're looking at that and you're encouraging them to go out of their comfort zones, then they're more likely to do that. And one last thing I want to talk about psychological safety that's not often mentioned in the literature is psychological safety is also related to being able to share professional struggles. So we want people to be candid about their concerns, but we also want them to be candid about their struggles. What are they struggling in? So, oftentimes people want to conceal what they're struggling in because they don't want to, present that they're not doing a good job. They don't get all figured out. But you really want to try to create an environment to where if someone needs extra help, needs extra training, needs extra support in an area, you want them to come in and talk to you about it. And so as a leader, what are you doing to facilitate that kind of environment? So if people are not freely sharing their struggles and concerns, then you should be asking yourself, why is that not happening? And so when we look at psychological safety, there's a lot of great things that come out of it. But again, just to recap a couple great things from the article is that you don't want to talk about it too much in terms of psychological safety, but you want to talk about the process. Again, Here's the goals. Here's why we're working towards them. And your input matters in this. It does matter, but you also need to deliver. You need to show people that their input does matter. So when people do say things in a group, they're taking risk. Just remember, whenever someone speaks out against something, that's a risk. And so it's vital for you as a leader to acknowledge the risk that people take, whether in a group setting or individually, to acknowledge that and validate it and saying, look, I see you took a risk there. Thank you. And also, when people do speak in groups, this is a great opportunity to circle back individually and recognize them. Hey, Tim, you know what? Thank you for speaking up in our group yesterday. And I really appreciate your perspective on this issue. And so just let them know that, I'd like to see more of that. Thank you for doing that. And what's great about it is you're providing weekly recognition in addition to reinforcing the behavior that you want to see, which is speaking more. But you have to facilitate an environment to where people are going to do it. Just saying you want psychological safety or that's your goal, that's not going to make it happen. So again, look at the article that will be in the notes. And let me know if you have any challenges with psychological safety. Reach out. It's definitely one of the issues that, one of the topics that we cover in the Highly Effective Managers program. And the next session is starting on 7/24. So I got 10 seats left. Someone just signed up 11 people. I got another one signed up 3, another one signed up 2, and I got several other organizations evaluating right now. So that's an open group. But also I work with organizations too. So I'm working with 8 to 10 organizations at any given time. So if you're interested in learning more for your organization, reach out to me, Tim at highlyeffectiveorganizations.org. And I'm happy to send over a book for you to evaluate. We can set up a demonstration of the managers program. I can show you the workbook, show you what it entails, and learn more about your organization and your challenges. But psychological safety is definitely one of those things that we cover. But again, let me know your thoughts on any other topics that you'd like me to cover in upcoming podcasts. And have a great day. See you guys next week.